DeepSeek has taken the world by storm, and it has blown up in popularity, with many international news outlets covering how it is suddenly competing with AI companies within America. In this video, I'm going to talk about what DeepSeek is, what you need to know about it, why it competes with things like ChatGPT, and we're going to cover how you can use it, how I, as a teacher, find it useful, and perhaps things that we need to be concerned about too. DeepSeek was developed by a company called Highflyer, and they are a hedge fund based in China, and they usually create AI systems to support them with trading algorithms. Now, in the past, they generated something called V3, and V3 supported and competed with things like Anthropic's Claude and OpenAI's ChatGPT 4o. One thing to note with that model in particular, though, it was already 1/5 of the cost of those two models that I've mentioned. DeepSeek R1 released about a week ago and has, like I said, taken the world by storm. The reason for this is all kind of based on parameters. Parameters are typically the brain cells of your AI large language systems. Now, when it comes to parameters, things like OpenAI's ChatGPT 01 uses a huge amount of parameters, and as a result, was traditionally known as the most intelligent reasoning model. However, the big fuss around DeepSeek R1 is that it's able to use something to train it a little bit differently, and what that means is it's able to be just as intelligent, and in some benchmarks more intelligent than OpenAI's ChatGPT 01, but use 95% less parameters or brain cells. This essentially means that they can generate outputs that are potentially better in the world of reasoning, because this is a reasoning model, but be 27 times cheaper. Now, as a result, the world has reacted with all sorts of crazy things happening, and Nvidia, the company that creates lots of powerful chips that run the models, lost about 600 billion in market net worth over the week that it was released. I believe that's going to recover, etc., but it's crazy to see that that has been the outcome of this model being released. So what else makes DeepSeek R1 even more special? And it's more to do with the way that it's been trained, and that is why it's able to use 95% less in terms of parameters and therefore be cheaper. So basically what happens is traditionally, when we train AI, you would use what's called labeled data. Now, labeled data says, if something comes out, an output comes out, it's either good or bad, and therefore it gets a reward. And the training comes from that. What this does is something slightly different through what's called supervised fine-tuning or reinforcement learning. And if you imagine it like a child falls off a bike and slowly they learn that they don't do certain things, and eventually they're able to ride said bike. We wouldn't, give them a treat just because they're able to ride down on their bike. We're training their AI based on the things that it learns to be a little bit more smarter. To give you a real world analogy, imagine going to something like a dentist. When you're going to a dentist, you want to go and see the specialist based on whatever problem you have. Now, with traditional AI, what would happen is we send every single specialist to the problem that you might have. And what this means is you suddenly have lots and lots of data, lots of specialists coming to you, and of course that would be extremely expensive. With DeepSeek R1, it's slightly different. You would go into the dentist reception, and the reception, based on its understanding of the problem, would then label you to a specific person. So if you had a toothache, they would send you perhaps to an endodontist, who would then be able to perform something like a root canal based on that problem that you have. That's enough talk about dentists. Ugh. The next thing that I love about DeepSeek R1 is the fact that it shows its chain of thought. What this means is that you can see the reasoning behind every step that it's taken when you ask it a specific question, and it's saying, okay, why am I saying this the way that I am? Along with that, if there are problems called hallucinations, where it's creating and generating information that perhaps is not true, at times it's able to self-correct too. These things have been seen in the past, but it's something that's really cool with this system. This model is reported to have been created by Highflyer, this DeepSeek model, for about 6 million, and was trained using older Nvidia chips because they don't have access to the newest Nvidia chips due to USA's sanctions on China. Now, if we're talking about why I think it's potentially better than OpenAI's ChatGPT 01, Straight away, it just comes down to cost. Because of using 95% less parameters, it is cheaper for them to run. Now, to access OpenAI's ChatGPT o1, I'm just going to start calling it o1, it costs £200 per month. As a teacher, I've never used it. I don't have that much money to put towards something like that. So to be able to use something that's in competition and potentially better, but at a fraction of the cost is a bit of a game changer, to be fair, for someone like myself. In addition to it being free, it is also open source. And what that means is that you can see all the different mechanics that make up this algorithm that allows DeepSeek AI to create the information that it does. Along with it being open source, so people can see how it works, you can also download it locally. That means that you can download it onto a device like a computer so that you can take it away and it doesn't need to be connected to the internet to run it, which is pretty incredible nowadays. And I do believe that's going to be a trend that we see in 2025, where more and more of these different AI systems will be downloaded locally. Okay, so let's jump on to DeepSeek to have a little bit of a look at what it is and how it works. So after a typical sign-up process, you are then taken to a window. Across the bottom, you will have three different things. You will have your Allow Thinking, web search, which then connects directly to the website, and then you can attach documents, of course, then by pressing go, you would then be able to let it go. What this allows you to do is to see the chain of thought. When you tap on that DeepSeek R1, you're going to be able to see the thought. Now, a typical process to help AI reason with something that it typically struggles with is to ask it a question like, how many R's are there in strawberry? I know that would be a really simple question, but for some reason AI struggles with that question. So what's really cool about this is you can see the chain of thought where it's going through each letter and you can see, okay, this is not an R, this is an R, yes, 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 and then it gives you that answer. You can, of course, take that chain of thought option off where it just gives you that answer, but it is amazing to see that that is an option. Now, typically with DeepSeek R1, this is what's called a reasoning LLM. So for many things, it's actually going to be a little bit more complex. This is going to be better with more mathematical and scientific topics. For more creative writing purposes, there are still going to be times where ChatGPT and even Claude will be better at producing model texts, generating questions for reading comprehensions and things like that. That's my example as a teacher. However, when it comes to reasoning, I love the fact that it shows you its chain of thought, the way that it's reasoning, because as a teacher, you can sometimes question where those misconceptions come from and what children might be thinking when they're generating answers. So you can imagine that seeing potential chains of thought with a question you might ask as a teacher would really help you unpick how children might see things and how they might make misconceptions come to be. So I think there's a lot of power in something like this with that chain of thought, so that you can start to see how you would unpick a question and how children perhaps would make mistakes and therefore have misconceptions. Now, DeepSeek R1 has come with a few questionable safety concerns. Some of these things are based on Western bias, but with perhaps quite clear distinctions of concern. For example, first one is bias. So the bias perhaps goes from China, and if you're asking it to come up with things about Chinese Communist Party, etc., is going to have that bias towards that because it is from China. Along with that, there is data concerns. So the way that the data is stored, some people have those concerns that the data is stored in China. You can then talk about ethical concerns of, well, is it going to be safer if you're using free ChatGPT and it's contained in and used for data training in America? You kind of got those questions there. It is worth noting though that often when we think of things that we use being free, they're typically not, because you're typically paying with your data. Things like Claude do protect your data a little bit more, so perhaps that's something you might want to consider. Finally, there's that censorship. Censorship, because it's a Chinese-based system. If you ask something like, okay, who does Taiwan belong to, it's going to become quite biased towards that answer too. You do need to be aware of when you're using new AI systems. As a teacher and educator, it is my moral responsibility to say though that there are certain things that you must not do when using AI. I don't want to tell anyone to suck eggs, as we say here in the UK, but it is still important as someone who creates on AI to tell you about the things that you shouldn't be putting into these AI systems. So here's what not to share when using AI. Firstly, any personal information of either yourself, your school, or the children, of course, who you teach. We shouldn't be inputting photos, sensitive documentation, videos of yourself, other staff, and of course children from a safeguarding stance, because like I said, we don't know what is happening to that data. And if you're using something for free, typically that data is being used to train future models, so that data could come up in the future too. Alongside that, when I talk about school documentation, we would also be thinking about things like health information and financial information, safeguarding information, all those bits of information that you would typically think of as sensitive data. You would be extremely surprised when you hear of different policies being inputted into AI systems so that they can regenerate new drafts. And I can completely see how that would be useful. However, that sensitive information is then accessible by those free AI systems if you've not opted out of using your data, or if that system isn't even, a possibility of opting out of your data being used for retraining. Just something to be aware of. And as a teacher creator who creates some AI, I need to say these things too. DeepSeek R1, absolutely mind-blowing, and opens up huge possibilities in terms of the way that we can use cheaper AI to then access stronger AI, because I'm under the belief that we were starting to reach a bit of a wall where AI was becoming so labor intensive and cost intensive that we were starting to potentially see limitations. Now, this allows new things to be possible, but for cheaper, which is also brilliant too. So what are your thoughts on DeepSeek R1? Do you think we'll see more models like this in the future? If you've enjoyed this video, make sure you go and check out more videos that I've created in the field of AI and edtech. Make sure you subscribe for future videos, and check out my website where I'm going to be sharing more updates on AI and potential guides and systems, courses, things like that to help you too. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Until then, I'm out.